All right, well, thank you guys all so much for joining us on a Monday morning, no less, to talk about data centers. My name is Sara Kassir, and I'm the research policy lead for the Lynn Center for Science, Society, and Policy at Caltech, or LCSSP. And we're really excited to be hosting this event alongside the Caltech Science Exchange and the Resnick Institute for Sustainability. A couple of housekeeping announcements. This is our earthquake emergency policy. If you could take a moment to please review it. Also, we are recording. The video will be available, TBD if it will be in full or in clips, but it will be on the YouTube channel, LCSSP YouTube. And yeah, I'll just give you a minute to take a look at that. Another note, bathrooms are, if you go to this way and then to the right, you'll be looking at the men's bathroom, and then the women's bathroom is a little bit further down the hall. This is our community statement of ethical conduct. Again, if you could just take a moment to read that. All right, now that we have the housekeeping out of the way, again, thank you all for joining us. So I'm just gonna be starting us off with a little bit of motivating the conversation. And then I'm really excited because we actually have a few people who are external to Caltech to explain really what it's like to be on the ground helping communities navigate these decisions. Obviously at Caltech, we're very proud of our scientific expertise, and we look forward to sharing that with you during the latter half of this programming. But we'll start off with some folks who have been intimately involved in helping communities as they've been sort of navigating these proposals. We'll do a quick coffee break, and then, like I said, we'll move into our two faculty members who will be sharing some of the research that's relevant to data centers they've been working on, and then lunch. You might have also seen on the agenda that if you're interested in seeing the Resnick building that we're currently in, we'd love to show you around, so there'll be an optional tour. It's pretty cool if you've never been, so. All right. So when we first started talking about data centers and why we thought it was so important to have an event like this one, I immediately found myself thinking about the nature of local government, both in terms of what draws people to work in it and also the kind of authority it has in the US context. And I'm sure I don't have to tell any of you this. My background's actually in public policy, so I have a lot of respect for public servants, but most people who go into local government do so for a pretty specific reason. They want to have a real material effect on the things that, oops, we good? All right. On the things that shape, the daily lives of people in the communities where you actually live. That's what local government is for, and I think it's something that, honestly, people who work at the state and federal level often envy. You just get to really see the impacts of what you do every day. There's no kind of layer between you and the public by definition, and derived from the 10th Amendment, the scope is public health, safety, and general welfare, which is directed to the states, and then in California Constitution, we explicitly grant those authorities to local governments as well. So because local government is supposed to be so tied up in the business of securing the public health, safety, and general welfare of a community, I can empathize with the fact that the last 20 years of technology becoming a bigger part of society and much more integral to the welfare of a community being a kind of frustrating thing for local governments to navigate. So as these systems have become more and more woven into daily life, decisions have sort of moved further away from where we have this intuition of kind of wanting them to be. Ride hailing, short-term rentals, social media in schools, things that we, didn't necessarily consent to as communities, but are opting into in a lot of times because they're very difficult to opt out of. we kind of have to take the benefits with the costs, and you might have levers that you'd otherwise want to pull to influence these things that just aren't really attached to anything in the context of tech platforms and the kind of encroachment they have on especially the provision of services that have historically been the business of local government. Which is why data centers are, I think, exciting, because it's sort of a almost return to the opportunity to directly influence what tech is doing for communities. But before we get into that, I think despite the fact that despite being on the front lines of ensuring community welfare, local governments' concerns about big tech have often been dismissed with responses like these. Everyone has heard this one, I'm sure. Regulation will kill innovation and investment. If things don't work out, we'll just iterate. It's software, no big deal. The risks are too hard to quantify. You're all just fear-mongering and guessing. And the benefits might be so much greater than what everyone's thinking about. So in addition to the fact that we don't have the traditional levers to influence things like what your Ubers and your Airbnbs are doing, we also have all of these sort of talking points that further kind of inhibit local government's sense of empowerment. But they really don't hold in the context of data centers. So regulation being something that will kill innovation investment, I think what we've really seen is that in the absence of any kind of regulation, data centers, the companies that build them, have failed to internalize their externalities and are very much so allowing the communities that host these centers to feel the burden. If things don't work out, you can't really just start over with an aquifer or a 30-year utility contract. It's much stickier than just trying to launch a new version of an app. The risks are not actually that hard to quantify. They're very real and tangible, and we have a lot of good models for understanding the environmental impacts and the health impacts of data centers. And the benefits, typically in the context of these negotiations, are more likely to be overhyped than they are to be undersold. And communities have kind of seen that, especially when it comes to the number of jobs that are being created. So if the way that we've been talking about a lot of tech policy issues doesn't really work with data centers, and we kind of have this opportunity to, if you will, wrest control over something that maybe at first glance feels like another faraway AI policy topic that's for Sacramento and the federal government to figure out, how should we be talking about these things? And I think the trap that I kind of want to head off here is a lot of the discourse around data centers has kind of aligned itself to the same sort of debates that we hear about other parts of tech policy, where you're either an optimist who thinks technology will fix every problem, and if we just give it enough time, it'll all work out. And on the other side, it's if you allow these sort of facilities to proliferate, you are doing something that's like existentially wrong and problematic. The truth is, obviously not in either of those camps. But I just wanted to sort of pull these two examples because everyone has what's a data center FAQ page now, and you can see from the things that they choose to highlight just how politicized the language in defining what a data center is can be. I personally like the Congressional Research Service version. A data center is a physical facility that houses and runs large computer systems, but that's just me. So if we aren't going to talk about what data centers are, what if we talked about what they're not? I think that this is actually something where there's a lot more consensus and opportunity to kind of cut through the noise. So one thing data centers are definitely not is they're not an abstract policy concern that's for Sacramento or DC to figure out. And I know I don't know about all of you, I had to turn off the Google alerts for data center policy, regulation, news stories, because it's constant. There have been hundreds of bills introduced in the last few years, and I think, politicians at all levels of government recognize that this is a salient topic, gets attention, people are upset about it, they want to see action. So perhaps it's tempting to think that it'll be addressed by a different level of government. So just to give you a little bit of context on what's being introduced versus what's actually being enacted, and interestingly, quite a lot is being vetoed. So water use bills, 64 have been introduced in less than 2 years, only 3 have been passed, 17 have failed, which means they either didn't get out of chamber, or I think about 7 of them were vetoed, which is pretty surprising, I think, including one in California. Governor Newsom vetoed a bill last October that would have required reporting on water use of data centers. And a current bill sponsored by Assemblymember Bauer Kahan, I believe, was supposed to have reporting on both electricity use and water, but half of it got stripped out in the most recent iterations. So even when these bills are promising and they look like they're moving, they really are getting watered down or they're dying at the last second. Transparency, 116, 5 passed, 36 failed. And same with clean energy. So all that's to say, this idea that we can kind of rely on state or federal government to sort of address the problem and provide us with the solutions we need to navigate this effectively is not necessarily, I think, a fruitful path. The other reason that it might not necessarily be a good idea to want that to be the right path is data centers are not your typical one-off economic development project. They are super context dependent, as you'll hear about today. What's a good data center in one area might be a very bad data center in another area. The permitting infrastructure that currently exists does not allow us to effectively evaluate all of the factors in tandem. So we can't just treat these like strip malls and hope that it'll all work out for the best. And just to sort of underpin that point a little bit, here's the scale. So I'm starting December 2024. You can see green are active, orange announced, blue under construction. So in 6 months increments. And here's where we are in Southern California as of right now. So we don't actually have as many announced as in a lot of other parts of the country, but we have quite a few in a relatively small area. So just to kind of summarize a lot of what I talked about and kind of set us up for the rest of the day, at the end of the, really, I think the starting point here is recognizing that these decisions are already local. This isn't an argument about trying to move authority somewhere where it is not already, or getting local governments to do something that is not very thoroughly in their natural scope to do. So it's more about empowering those of you who are making these decisions with the right information. The conditions are genuinely heterogeneous, so if you hear anyone say, here are 2 best practices for all data centers, or you should have one-size-fits-all regulation, please take that with a lot of, grain of salt is not, you should run if that's the advice you're getting. And the third piece is, just like I was showing you with the state policy, dozens of states are throwing ideas out. They're really not sticking. If they do stick, it's not clear that they'll improve the status quo for anybody, especially when it comes to providing local governments with information. So if we can kind of keep these 3 themes in mind, that'll set us up for the rest of the day. All right. Thank you all.